Today we're going to review expressing fractions as decimals. Remember, you learned two methods. The first method you actually learned last year. Last year you learned the equivalent fraction method. So let's review this one first. And remember, I'm using a pen so that you can see this clearly on video. You should be using a pencil for your math work. So I'm going to put a line right down the middle as we review these two methods. The first method, like I said, is making an equivalent fraction. You can do this when the denominator can be turned into a 10, 100, or 1,000. So, for example, in the fraction 2/5, 5, the denominator, can be turned into 10. So I can make an equivalent fraction by multiplying by 2. We know that when we read this fraction now, it is 4/10, which as a fraction, as a decimal, is written like this. So 2/5 written as a decimal is 4/10. That will work for any fraction that has a number in the denominator that can be turned into 10, 100, or 1,000. Here's another one. Let's change 7/25 into a decimal. Go ahead and do this on your own using the equivalent fraction method. Okay, here I would multiply by 4 to make my denominator 100. This means that when I write my decimal, it will go to the hundredths place. If I multiplied my denominator by 4, I have to do the same thing with my numerator. So my numerator becomes 28. This is 28 hundredths. Written as a decimal, looks like this, 28 hundredths. So that's how we use the equivalent fraction method. But what happens when you have a fraction that looks like that? A 9 cannot be turned into 10, 100, or 1,000. This is not a factor of either of those products. So we're going to need to use division for this method. So we have the equivalent fraction method, and then we have the division method. We know that this line right here, that fraction line, literally means divided by, right? So I can convert 2/9 into a decimal by dividing. I'm going to solve off to the side. 2 divided by 9. And remember, you want to make sure that if you're reading the fraction from top to bottom, you also write your division inside to outside. So 2 divided by 9, 2 divided by 9. And now I'm going to add my decimal. I'll add the 0 to begin solving. 9 can't go into 2. I'm going to add my decimal. 9 can go into 22 times. I'll multiply, subtract, bring down. 9 goes into 20. Again, 2 times. I multiply, subtract, add another 0, bring it down. And this actually will go on and on and on. Notice that I keep getting a 2 to add into my quotient. Here we're going to stop because I'm actually going to round this to the 2 decimal place. I'm going to round it to the hundredths. And if I do that, I'm going to look at the hundredths place. I'll look next door, and it would be 22 hundredths. Now, rounding to the hundredths place is common because think about it. Let's say that I purchased, rounding to the 2 decimal place or the hundredths place is actually pretty common because money is always rounded to the 2 decimal place. It's always rounded to the hundredths. The hundredths place in money is a penny, right? We don't have any amount of money that is less than a penny. So when you are running a business, if something comes out like this, if a calculation comes out to the thousandths, 10 thousandths, or so on, the amount would always be rounded to the hundredths. Remember, we talked about this with gas prices as well. When you're paying for gas, it actually always shows to the thousandths place on the gas sign, right? But when you're paying, the total cost is then rounded to the hundredths place. Okay, let's do a few of these. I want you to get more comfortable with the division method. So I want you to solve 3/8 and convert 3/8 into a decimal number. This one, you're not going to round to a place value. It will come to an end. So what is 3/8 as a decimal? We're going to solve through division, so we should be set up like this. 3 divided by 8. I'll add the decimal point and a 0. 8 can't go into 3, so I add the 0 and bring my decimal up in my quotient. 8 goes into 30, a total of 3 times. I'm going to subtract, add another 0, bring it down. 8 goes into 67 times. We get 56. We subtract. We're not done yet because we want to solve it all the way out, so I'm going to add another 0 and bring it down. 5 goes into 45 times. And now when I subtract, I get a 0, and I'm done. So 3/8 as a decimal is 375 thousandths. Okay, what happens now if I said to convert 2 3/8 into a decimal? You can use the information that you've already solved. You don't have to necessarily do the division again. But what would the decimal be now? Well, 3/8 still equals 375 thousandths, right? But now we have 2, the whole number 2. So we're just going to add that into our answer. This would be 2 375 thousandths. So when we're converting mixed numbers to decimals, the whole number doesn't change. You kind of sit that one off to the side, and then you convert the fraction amount, and then you put them together. Try another one for me. I want you to solve this one on your own. What would 1 5/7 be as a decimal? So I know that I'm going to have 1 as the whole number part. So I can go ahead and add a 1 and then my decimal. The 5/7, that's a fraction. So it's going to be less than 1 whole. So I'm going to solve by dividing. 5 divided by 7. Because 7 can't be turned into 10, 100, or 1,000. I'm going to add my decimal point and my 0. 7 can't go into 5, so I'll put my 0 there and I'll bring up the decimal point. 7 goes into 50 7 times. I'm going to multiply and subtract. I'll add another 0 and bring it down. 7 goes into 10 1 time. I'm going to subtract and bring down another 0. 7 goes into 30, a total of 4 times. And I'm going to stop there because I only had to solve, whoops, you couldn't see the bottom there, could you? I'm going to stop there because I only had to solve to the 2 decimal place. So if I round this, it is going to become 71 hundredths because this is 4 or less, so we will let this one rest. So as a decimal, it would be 1 71 hundredths. I want you to try the following problems for independent practice today. Go ahead and practice these 10 problems in your notebook, solve them out, snap a picture when you're done, and send them my way. Please make sure to box your answers. So you can pause the video to copy these down. I'm going to scroll down a little bit because it looks like 5 and 6 are cut off. But you can pause now to copy these down, and I'll scroll down in just a minute. Notice that the directions for 7, 8, 9, and 10 say solve 7 through 10 to the 2 decimal. So just these ones are to the 2 decimal. All of these you'll solve out to the exact answer. Use the method that is most appropriate for the problem given. So you can rewind the video, you can refer to your notes. Remember, if it is a denominator that can be changed into 10, 100, or 1,000, you are going to want to use the first method. The equivalent fraction method is quickest. If you cannot turn the denominator into 10, 100, or 1,000, you have to use the division method to solve. Okay, I'm going to scroll down so that you can see 5 and 6. 5 is 11/20, and 6 is 5 11/20. Remember, when you're doing mixed numbers, you don't have to redo the division here. If you already have 11/20 done and you know what that is as a fraction, you are now going to combine that with 5 whole to create the decimal.